was full and high up in the sky when Josh came out of the tent with his bottle of scotch. He had been hiking all day at Skinwalker Peak, and now he could finally rest. He looked at the view, and far away he saw the sparkling lights of Dreadford in the distance. The sound of crickets filled the mountain, and he felt at home. He reached in his jacket and took out a pack of cigarettes and lit one up, sitting in a camping chair. The cold air filled his nostrils, and the mix of alcohol and tobacco made him more relaxed. Monday he would have to go back to his minimum wage job as a barista, but tonight he was a free man. He thought about Carla. She was a client at his coffee place, and they have been flirting for a while, and yesterday by chance he bumped into her outside his work. He built up his nerve and asked her out, and she accepted. They would go to the movies and see where the night would go from there. The thought of the date made him smile, but he never noticed. Suddenly the place became very quiet, and a chill ran up his spine. He looked one way and another, and in the bushes, drowned in shadows right where the camplight could not reach, he saw what seemed to be a figure looking at him. He got up and took a step forward, but there was nothing. He asked if someone was there but heard no answer. He stood in place for a while until he convinced himself it was his mind playing tricks. He took another sip of whiskey and lit up another cigarette. When he lifted his head, he saw again, right in front of him, standing still in the darkness. He could feel the eyes of the figure on him. He asked whoever it was to make itself known, but the figure gave a step behind the trees and vanished. Josh thought he was seeing things. He looked at the glass of whiskey and threw the remainder of the glass on the floor. He walked around camp for a while, but did not find anyone. He checked his 38 just to make sure, but decided it was his mind playing tricks. Skinwalker Peak was known for eerie and bizarre occurrences. Glowing orbs, Bigfoot, skinwalkers, feral people were part of the mythology of these mountains, but Josh never took it seriously. Finally, he gave up and went to his tent to try to get some sleep. The next day, he packed all his gear and continued his hike. As he went through the trail, the hair on his neck raised and a feeling of dread and impending doom started to flood his mind. He stopped and checked his surroundings, but even though no animal or person was visible, he could not shake the feeling off. He continued his path, trying to be as much aware as he could, but that feeling never left. He stopped to rest for a bit, drink water and eat. As he was munching on a protein bar, he heard the snap of a twig outside the trail. He looked around, and he could swear he was seeing a dark figure between branches some 30 feet from him. He brushed his eyes and looked again, but no one was there, and the hair on his arm raised. He tried once again to brush it off, made camp, but decided this night he would spend it inside his tent. He checked his map, calculated how far he was from his destination, and went to sleep. He was awoken by steps on his camp. Crippling fear took hold of him, and he stood still under his covers. The steps continued and stopped right next to his tent, and whoever it was stood there gazing upon it for a while. He trembled, and it was with great effort that he held his breath, and when he could not hold it any longer, he tried as quiet as possible to breathe by his mouth. Finally, whoever it was went away. He stood there for a bit, and then came out terrified. He looked at the ground, and there were no footprints nor anyone. He felt he was spiraling. Was he going mad? Seeing things? He went back to his tent and tried to make himself sleep, but could not. When it was almost morning, he felt the smell of cigar invading his tent. That was it. He broke camp and returned to the trail. He was still one night away from his destination and decided to leave earlier. He spent another day feeling that he was being watched. Many times he thought he was seeing a figure outside the trail, but he had enough. He decided to ignore it and just finish the trail as quickly as he could, but now he was carrying his 38 by the waist in any case. The final night was here. Josh did not make fire this time. He didn't want his camp to be visible from afar, and he wanted to break camp as fast as he could the next day. He went to bed early and spent his time inside at all times. The feeling of being watched went away, and he finally fell asleep. At the witch's hour, he was awakened by what he thought was a bear sniffing around his camp. Although the size was right, the shadows projected in the sides of the tent revealed more wolf-like features on the creature's head. Josh was puzzled and frightened at the same time. He reached for his 38 and cocked it. The creature heard and stopped immediately what it was doing, and in an immense display of cunning, slowly walked away from camp. But when Josh could finally rest again, he heard it. A howl cut the silence of the night. Horrified, he started to gather his things as quickly as possible. He was breaking camp when he heard snarls and paws trampling the dirt. He collected only the necessary things leaving his tent and his boots behind, and started to run downhill bare feet as fast as he could. The only thing he carried was his .38. He heard barking and ran even faster, but stumbled, rolling down. His head was grazed and he stood up looking behind. He saw a mountain of fur and muscles coming after him, snarling. He took his gun and shot the creature 3 times. The animal was deterred enough for him to start to run again as fast as he could. He fled in darkness, barely seeing what was in front of him as the beast was constantly nearing. He could feel a warm breath in his neck. He screamed and ran, his legs burning beneath his weight. The beast was ever so close, but never catching him. He looked behind and saw the jaws of the animal reaching for his flesh. He jumped, barely escaping. When he landed, one of his feet stepped wrong and he fell. It was broken. He cried in pain, wincing. He shot everything that remained in the gun, but nothing could deter the beast this time. His vision was blurry and fading because of the pain and desperation, but when he could see again, there was only the red gleaming eyes of the creature before his jaw opened and bit him, and everything went dark. The next day, he was woken up by 2 hikers who found him. The sun shone brightly in his eyes, obfuscating his vision. He felt his skin covered in sweat and some blood, but his foot was healed. Did he hallucinate everything? The hikers told him not to worry. They had sent word to the park rangers. He was tired and still scared, but felt safe and allowed himself to collapse.